guys for being with us today. We appreciate it, and we don't take that for granted. So we're thankful that you're here. I know you had to get up a little bit earlier. I know you had to come here instead of into your straight normal job. So we appreciate it. Like I said, we don't take that for granted. Just a couple of safety comments. Should there be an emergency, you'll exit right out the doors that you came in on. There'll be someone out there with a yellow flag in the far corner that you'll know where to go. On a lesser note, if you need the restrooms, they're right out either one of these doors into the hallway and on your right. And then afterwards, there's still plenty of food out here. Feel free to mingle and talk and visit as long as you want. We'll be fine around here. So I'm excited about this topic today. I think this governance is something that transcends industry. And what we try to do in these sessions is bring a little bit of intellectual property to the kind of the community of project management. It'll be very, I'm sure, open dialogue. These guys will solicit questions and your responses, because I think that's something we can do in the Center of Expertise of Project Management is learn from one another. So this topic, you can imagine, and all of you probably know, has been a huge push in the last few years. I mean, I only need to mention things like Enron, Tyco International, WorldCom. All of those companies were really the whole push for the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that we're going to talk about today. So it's something that's important to us. It's something that sometimes, one of the things that I had an old mentor of mine used to say is what's accepted by one generation is embraced by the next. And I think it's very easy for all of us to wake up. I don't think any of those folks said, we're going to embezzle millions and billions of dollars. I think what happened is, and this is what I tell my team a lot, they kind of got outside those lines just a little bit, and then a little bit led and ended up being like this. And they looked back and they were in the situations they're in. So governance is something, it's a little bit like core values. People always know it's there, but it's not always on the forefront of their mind. And so the importance and the emphasis we see on that, like I said, can be seen in the media just about every day. So I'm excited about it. You've got two great presenters from our healthcare business line, and so I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'm going to turn it over to these guys and let them jump into it. So thank you all.
Thanks, Misty. Well, I'm Andy Basler, and this is Janet. I'll let her introduce herself in a second. Grew up in the mean streets of public accounting, and so I was in the compliance and audit world for a while, and got there from a series of bad decisions. I tell everybody. Came back over to corporate, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, did a tenure at TVA, so I've got kind of a checkered past, so to speak. Janet and I aren't your traditional project managers. We didn't grow up being just project managers, but as we look at our history, that's all we've done is manage projects. Everything we did was projects. We didn't realize it. So we're going to have a little bit different take on governance around project management, but we're going to try to tie it back to all you really, truly hardcore PMPs. We're going to add some terminology in there just so you're comfortable. We want to be interactive, so feel free. We're going to ask you some questions. Feel free to chime in, and afterwards we'll be signing autographs in the back. Donations. We got a tip jar.
I'll pay you to not ask for his autograph.
And I've got a bonus at the end. That's the teaser. I got a bonus for everybody.
My name's Janet Gentilette, and as Andy said, I did not grow up in the project management world. I have about 16 or so years of experience in the automotive industry, and my career's all been in corporate finance. And I've moved from automotive to the service sector, working at TVA for a few years, and then coming to Management Solutions. And as Andy said, project management really runs through about everything that I've done. I just didn't call it that, and I didn't use the right or the most commonly accepted terminology for it. So one of the great things about what Andy and I can do for you is we can tie in real world to that PMP speak.
Yep.
So that's what we hope to do today.
Yep. And we'll talk about what we're going to cover today here in a second, but I want everybody to, my disclosure is I'm a caveman, I'm a simple man, so I have to deal in simple terminologies. When you talk about governance, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I'm going to give you the quick and dirty, what we can do in 30, 40 minutes on how do you recognize good governance. So to kick it off, I want a little bit of interaction from the team.
Well, that's one thing I didn't test.
Hit enter, maybe.
Nope.
How do you guys define governance? And it can be around project management, it can be anything. What do you guys think? Define governance for me, somebody. I will call people.
He will.
Bro, you got your mouth full.
There is no wrong answer.
Oversight.
Okay, good.
Compliance.
Ugly word. Compliance. Good. What else?
Control.
Anybody else?
Best practice.
Civility.
I'm sorry, say again?
Civility.
Civility.
It's a big word. $5 word.
Oh, by the way, I don't have a spell checker.
It's good preventive maintenance.
There you go.
Anybody else? One more person. And it could be something completely different. Framework. Good. I like these. These are good. And I'll be honest, when I've polled different folks, these seem to be all generally the same. We probably have a little bit of groupthink here. When I go out and poll folks, what's governance, especially maybe not a group of folks that are more in our line of work, I get a lot of different answers. It's a buzzword. I think there's going to be a lot of different interpretations of what governance is. So here's a couple of quick definitions. Webster, the way that a city company is controlled, we have that word, by the people who run it. And then this guy's really smart, this next guy. Elements that provide structure to a function that increases the chances of success. Doesn't guarantee it, it just increases the chances. And that's, again, I'm the simple person. It's what the folks in charge, what structure do they put in place? We have that word, don't we? Structure, no we don't. But what do they put in place to increase the chances of success? Because that's what we're trying to do here, right? It's increase the chance of success, whatever that may be. If it's in project management, we'll talk about that. If it's governance or government that we have today, it's how do we increase the chances of success?
Hey, Andy,
Sure.
I love the way you say that, because many times when people think of governance, they think of increases our ability to keep us out of the ditch.
Yeah. Yep. I was listening to NPR on the way in because I'm a smart guy. Okay. But they're talking about the state of Maine just put something in place around opiates are really bad, obviously. So they put something in place where starting a certain date, only certain milligrams could be prescribed per day. And I'm thinking, and everybody's complaining and moaning, but that's governance because the success is trying to cut down on the opiates problem. And that's a structure they put in place, controls, oversight, some of the things we talked about. And I use the general word elements. That's a big bucket, elements. And I'll tell you what the elements are here in a second. I'm glad you asked. This is just kind of a repetitive, setting the stage for today. It's a buzzword. We hear it every day. Why is it important? I kind of let the cat out of the bag on that. It's to drive to success. It's to set the stage for success. It doesn't guarantee it. And today we're going to talk about how that applies to project management. And Janet and I are going to give you just some simple elements to use to look at project management to see if it has good governance. So ultimately you'll be able to recognize what good governance looks like. Good? So if there's one slide you want to remember, this is it. This and the summary slide and my contact information. Those are only 3 slides. But this is a model that I've used in past lives, the elements of good governance. And at first glance, you're like, oh, great, another proprietary. Here we go, another model. But it's so simple, but it really works. And we're going to go through each of these here in a second. But role clarity. Do you have the roles defined? Does everybody know the roles? And all these, it's one thing to have them set or documented. They're not worth the paper they're written on if the people that are involved don't understand and know their roles. We'll talk about governance here in a second, or ownership here in a second with role clarity. Process and procedures, that's pretty simple, straightforward. We'll talk about that. Measuring performance and reacting, that's probably the number one thing, I think, of all these 4 elements that's important on good governance. And then managing risk. And managing risk is talking about compliance, oversight. Best practice is talking about process and procedures. Framework, process and procedures. Also measuring performance, that kind of cascades through all those. With me so far? Any questions, comments? All right, I'm gonna let Janet speak here in a minute. So real clarity, our role is defined. In the world of project management, we all know that, we have our responsibility assignment matrix. That's a big, long word. I know Derek on ours, we had a list of who's responsible for what, whether it be, again, it starts with the owner. And that's one thing to take away, there always can only be one owner. One owner. There's no, you can't have two, there's gotta be one owner, and I use the terrible analogy, there's always gotta be one throat to grab when things go wrong. In our old world, it was who had the G, the governance, it was one, it had to be one. Again, I talked about it, responsibilities established, but more importantly, are they understood and accepted? And you'll hear me repeat this throughout this presentation. A lot of us come from the government sector, and we have these project plans, responsibility assignment matrix, and all these fancy slides. Again, I'm a big proponent of that's okay, but if the people don't understand it, it's not worth the paper it's written on. Talk about our analogy.
Yeah, so one of the things I like to do in any presentation is you get a lot of buzzwords and everything, and it's hard to remember, so I'm going to give you a simple example to help keep this all in your head. Let's say you're going to plan a multi-day road trip. You're going to drive to Los Angeles with your family, maybe stop at the Grand Canyon along the way. And let's picture you have husband, wife, newly licensed teenager, and maybe, let's throw in an 8-year-old just for fun. Okay, so you're going to plan your road trip. All right.
Let's throw in Colette.
Let's throw in
A 6-year-old that likes, or a 9-year-old like I have, likes to talk a lot. A lot.
So what roles are there during a road trip like that?
Route planning.
Route planning, excellent. What else? Driver, absolutely. Kind of hard to get there without a driver.
Navigator.
Navigator, love it. Packing.
Your financial benefits.
Otherwise known as Dan.
Financial backer, love it.
That's
This
good.
may not be credible right now, but it was the noise control police.
No.
Yes, noise control, love it.
We did that with 6 kids in the car. Yes.
What else?
Tour guide.
Tour guide.
Who picks the music?
Your DJ.
Snacks distributor.
Snack distributor, love it.
Vehicle maintenance.
Yeah.
Vehicle maintenance, okay.
The iPads are charged.
Electrician.
Some millennial back there.
Here, we just gave you a fancy name. Next time you go on a road trip, make sure you call yourself the electrician.
So it's
I like the tech support of whoever came up with that. I would really
Tech support.
I don't know what it is, but I'm just the no guy. Just says no to everything. Whether that be disciplinarian, police, car police,
I'm just gonna call it the no guy.
CFO.
The no guy.
But these are great roles, and so this is it's a fun analogy. But then how do you know these roles, and what are the risks if people don't know the roles? And I keep going back to I'm more of an informal guy. If it's a small group, like it's your family, you probably know these roles through past performance, past experiences. But if it was a huge, we ran from Chattanooga to Nashville and got in a van with 8 people that I didn't know. We didn't know these roles, and it was a disaster. A fun disaster.
Going back to this, okay, you got an 8-year-old in the car. If you assume that you were the packing supervisor and your spouse assumed they were the packing supervisor, what's likely to be in the suitcase of the 8-year-old?
Legos.
Legos.
Lots of baby dolls.
Not underwear.
Probably one pair of underwear. Exactly. Good. This is excellent.
But again, it could be anything from a full-blown role itinerary type thing to just, hey, we know we've been doing this so long. And taking it back to this, if you want to recognize good governance, you would ask the people on the team, what are the roles? What are the roles? What's your role? Do you understand your role? And you might say, oh yeah, Tim's our financial guy. And I asked Tim, he's like, I don't know. I think I'm not. That's a problem. So it's really about understood. How you get there, that's up to you, and apply it in a different fashion.
They have to be communicated and accepted.
Yep. This is probably the biggest one, because ultimately, for me, governance is increasing my chances to reaching a goal. And so, first of all, has that goal been set? Let me back up a step. That's really important. That's really important project management. How do you define success for this project? Is it just, do you just want to implement it? Do you want it? Do you want to save money? What is it?
About that,
Yep. So, have they been set? Again, are they understood by the team? That's going to drive alignment, that everybody on the team is working towards the same goal to the project. And then the other thing is, how do we know when to course correct? No, pun intended on that. Pun intended. Course correct.
So I said at the beginning, we want to go to Los Angeles and maybe visit the Grand Canyon along the way. What metrics can we set to ensure that this is a successful trip?
Safety.
Safety. What do you mean?
You want to have plenty of water in case you get stuck. Backup plans. Might get sick.
Don't want to get in a wreck. But, okay.
Mileage per day, make sure we're making the progress we need to make.
I like your style. Get there. That's my damn goal. Shut up and get there.
Miles
I didn't say that part.
Okay, sorry.
I'm not the quiet one.
Dollars per mile.
Aha! Dollars per mile.
See the financial.
How about, I'm going to go crazy, how about having fun?
Oh, God forbid. How are you going to measure that, Andy?
Fun factor, I don't know.
Noise level in the vehicle.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Mom's
Screaming at each other or laughter.
Sanity.
Very focused on the noise.
Yeah.
I've done this in California before earplugs.
But let me just there's a lot of different goals there. So if we had 4 or 5 different goals, they could be competing goals. I think it's always good to narrow it down to have just a few goals, make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Make sure everybody's on the same page. The 8-year-old's idea of having fun may not be the same as the 16-year-old's. So making sure that everybody agrees up front that, yes, we're going to do some things that you like, we're going to do some things that you like, but you may not enjoy everything. Everybody is ultimately going to get their goals met.
Yep. And so the 2 biggest takeaways from this is, 3, defining your goals, and you got to measure. You got to measure against them. And this, to me, is really hard. When do you know when to course correct? When do you know to make a change? Because it's risky. And I don't have a great answer.
Chris?
Suggestion.
When do you know to course correct on that one?
Dollars per mile.
Yeah.
Hopefully before you run out of money.
There you go.
But again, to me, this if there's one takeaway from all these, I'm prioritizing. It's measuring, setting your goal, measuring against it, and then course correct when you need to. Process and procedures. This is kind of cut and dry, but still very important. Are they established in project management? Have you established how you're going to run the project, how things are going to work, how are you going to meet, how are you going to do changes? Are they understood? Again, have they been communicated? And really, are they used? And I keep going back to, these can be formal or they can be informal. I think the real proof in the pudding is if you ask team members, what's the policy for this? What's the procedure for this? If you get the same answer, I think you're driving towards success. If you get different answers, I've been in situations where they've had fantastic manuals kept up to date, but nobody read them. So I'd ask different people on the team, and they said, I don't know. I don't even know where it is. That's very important.
So,
I apologize. On each of these, in the middle, we had for all you PMP folks, we had the equivalent in the PMP world.
So what processes and procedures might you have on a road trip? This one's a little tougher.
Liquid management.
Liquid management.
Immersion.
From all mothers out there.
I was trying to think of a way I could say that.
Maybe have an emergency plan. I don't know. And again, this could be written or this could be just understood.
Head count checks.
Buddy checks. Oh, I've got a perfect one. What else? Matt?
What's that? Matt?
I know we've got some crazy control freaks in here. What do you have for a trip? At this time we're going to do this. At this time we're going to do itinerary.
We have the loading and unloading team and procedure.
Oh,
wow. 8 people in a station wagon across the country.
Wow, that's fun.
I swear my father was a drill sergeant.
Okay, the 16-year-old, you gonna have any rules about the 16-year-old driving?
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah, no.
Not.
Okay. Who drives when?
Okay, I'm gonna go back to my noise and complaints. You know, headphones when needed. Noise level.
Noise level. And you can see that some of these things go over into roles and responsibilities and go into some others. And so a lot of times I think when people are doing project management, they think about, oh, what bucket do I put it in? Doesn't matter. Your goal is to have a successful project, right? So as long as you've got it captured somewhere, the whole thing is to drive towards success of the project, not to worry about, oh, did I put it in my right place?
Yep. Good. And then the final one, risk management. The WCGW is what could go wrong. And this is, you know, from a ex-auditor standpoint, this is where I can speak for days on. But remember this, it's all about the objective. I can tell you 1,000 risks of what could go wrong today, but my objective is give a good presentation. What are the major risks that could get in the way of that? Risk could be things in my environment, things I control, things I can't control. It could be compliance. We talked about compliance earlier. Regulation. I'm working on a project right now, and I got to think about Sarbanes-Oxley. How is that going to impact the success of this project? So again, identify the risk to performance, not just risk. The world's full of risks, but I want the major risks that are going to impact my project. How do I manage those risks? We've all done this in a risk registry. And again, I hate it, but any other compliance issues that I need to make sure are addressed. You know, we got a risk registry, a risk management plan. But again, it's what could go wrong that prevents me from reaching my goal or my objective that we established in the measuring performance. And then how do I mitigate that? The one pitfall here is you do all this great stuff, you identify your objective, your risks, your mitigation plan, and then you put it right here, and you go over here and you start doing all your work. And you never go back and look at that until like, oh crap, we went off the tracks and I forgot to go back here and look. We could have seen it coming and activated the mitigation plan.
One of the things that I'll add, and we'll do this for the road trip, is to make sure that you look at the likelihood and the severity. Because I think a lot of times we get caught up in things that are highly unlikely and not very severe, and we focus on mitigating that. And really, we want to make sure that we capture the things that are highly likely and or could be disastrous, and make sure we cover those. Don't worry about these down here. Worry about these up here. So what are some of the things that we really, in a road trip, that we should be concerned about?
Making sure they don't run out of gas.
Gas. Where would you put that?
Pretty high.
With me, pretty high.
Pretty high in both?
It depends on the environment again. I mean, you gotta push it to the limit. And
Okay. Flat tire.
Or we could just say all vehicle maintenance.
Vehicle maintenance. Mechanical.
That's how severe.
Is that the objective?
High likelihood for you. Misty, you may want to have a conversation after this.
Someone getting sick, illness.
I'm just gonna lose a kid. Illness.
What's a big risk when you're going somewhere? We've all done it. Getting lost.
Challenges.
Getting lost. Yeah.
Getting lost.
If somebody can't read the map, I can't drive and read the map at the same time.
Okay, so.
The route you planned is now under construction and you have to take a detour.
Yeah.
Aha, detours.
young people don't understand that they have GPS now. In the old days, we had to actually read a map and use our sense of direction.
Yep, illness, yep.
Government shut down and then they closed.
It goes for park.
The park's closed. Fun canceled.
Plan B.
What are some mitigation? What
Yeah.
are some mitigation strategies on some of these?
Check beforehand.
Okay.
2 words.
Fly, I like that. Fly. That's good. That's just a whole different direction.
Have your car inspected before you leave.
Yep. AAA. That's from a guy who has really old cars.
Have your GPS so you can find your map to improve
Aha.
GPS or map.
Medicine for sick kids.
Money.
Yeah.
Oh, let's be specific. Let's do just cash.
Yeah.
But again, and this,
But that
this,
can be its own risk, right?
this relates, if anybody's done project management, this relates to project management, money. Money can fix a lot of these problems. I don't know how much we have, but
But if you get it, one of those little small towns, because they had to take that detour back, that's when it come in handy.
a couple others we had Red Bull,
Red Bull.
We're getting
That's right, I
sleepy.
forgot the Red Bull.
Red Bull.
scheduled stops. A cup so you don't have to go to the bathroom, stop. Sorry, childhood memory.
TMI.
Thank you.
Again, these relate, and my big takeaway here is we're all good at seeing identifying the risks. I know I'm guilty of just putting it to the side, and then I get so busy on the day-to-day operating the project that I forget to go back and look at these, say, have these changed? Because it's a living document, it's a living environment. Risks come and go.
Yeah, and it's iterative, because if you notice, if you plan well, you probably already have accounted for a lot of these. So that takes us back to the planning portion of it. Making sure that you look at the risks in advance.
Okay. So we're getting towards the end, but again, I'm a simple man. I'm just a caveman. Just remember these 4 elements, and you can recognize what good governance looks like. It's simple. And when I've used this model for several years, and it actually works. One size doesn't fit all. And anybody that says I've got the perfect governance model, you need to steer away from them. But I think if you look in these elements, understand the environment, and figure out what do I need in these 4 areas, you're really set up well for success. And I have to keep it simple. Again, I sound like a broken record to keep skipping. More focus on resources are being ensuring key stakeholders understand. You can have the fancy documents, you can have the thick manuals, but the understanding is really when the rubber meets the road.
Literally.
Yeah, pun intended again. Any questions or comments or thoughts before you get your bonus? 2 bonuses now.
I lived through this when the company I worked for was acquired by another company. The company I worked for previously that was acquired was extremely strong in project management, but really paid no attention to governance. They had all the strong tools, they hired really qualified project managers, but when a project started, they would just kind of throw it over the transom and wait for everything to settle out. The company that acquired us was really strong in the initiation of a project. Had strong project management tools to charter a team, to establish a direction, and to communicate that. And when I transitioned into the new company and learned those tools, I thought, aha, this is what we've been missing for 20 years of my career, is the discipline to sit down and tell everybody what you expect before you start, and then you learn really quickly, you get what you inspect, because you're not going to get what you expect, even if you charter and tell them correctly. So having a set of tools and process and procedures to measure progress is critical, but having the discipline to take the time to simply pull the team together and tell them where you're going is lacking in so many project teams, it's unbelievable.
And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've had the experience too, where when you get folks together and say, okay, we want to plan this out carefully, a lot of folks will push back and say, let's just get it done.
It's not comfortable.
It isn't, because you have to think it all through.
Who doesn't like to be governed?
So do y'all see governance sitting mostly with the project manager or like a director of projects or a COO or whom in an organization? I mean, obviously I know it impacts everybody, but at the end of the day, who does the buck stop with?
For the specific project, the buck stops with the project manager.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For the overall governance from the company's policies, et cetera, the project manager needs to understand and uphold those governance roles and responsibilities, but that would be more of the corporate level.
So it's a great segue to the bonus.
Mm-hmm.
The bonus is this model, we're applying it to project management. You can apply it to any function, whether it be finance, accounting, environmental, any function. And that's what I would do. I'd apply this to any function. And it was amazing how it's so simple. You can apply it to any function. So to your question, Misty, if I'm just looking at the project, I'm going to apply it to the project. Probably the project manager is going to be my governance owner. If I'm going to apply it to all the projects, the suite, I'm going to the PMO, whoever's over the PMO. If I'm applying it to the whole company and so forth. So you can scale it. You can apply it to any function. And again, maybe it seems too simplistic when I first read it, like, this is silly, but it's like, wow, this really works for everything.
And I was going to comment on number 2, how I agree that one's extremely important because, and I think in terms of clients, your team may understand all of your infrastructure, your governance and procedures and so forth, but if your client, you and your client are on the same page there, you don't have much to work with there.
Exactly.
And a project of wheels can still come off a project if they don't understand change management and that sort of thing.
That's a great point. Have you ever had the experience where you're measuring performance and you discover that what you're measuring isn't the right metric?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So don't be afraid on any of this. It's iterative.
Oh, yeah.
Go back, make the changes, learn from your mistakes, and move on.
For one thing, one case that popped into my head is the implied ownership of something versus the explicit ownership.
Oh, yeah.
We had one thing, and we just never talked about a one task. It was like, well, it was implied it was yours. Nope, it wasn't on my list, so I didn't do it. And it's like, but you knew it. It wasn't on my list, and we just got into it. So we really important to be explicit in tasks and stuff. Even though it's like, okay, of course I'll do it.
Communicate for understanding.
Randy, you said something, triggered something too. We come from a world where we're really driving accountability. And this, I think, to me, I don't want to blow the scope of all this, but governance also, you can hold people accountable. And that role clarity, knowing, not implied, but everybody understands who's the right role and responsibility. Then you start holding people accountable because you've said the role, expectations, and then you hold them accountable. I'm a utopian. It's not fair to hold them accountable, but I didn't know that was my role. I didn't know that's what you expected.
Writing things down isn't always about CYA. Sometimes it is a good method of communication.
Andy, a thought that I had about the governance model and looking at yours over it is a good kind of assessment and checkpoint because likely organizations probably are not having dysfunction or trouble in all those areas. They may be really strong in certain ones. The trouble is that if you have a weakness in any of them, then your governance model falls apart and execution turns into chaos, right?
Yep.
So being able to look through and assess which ones you're doing well at, which ones need improvement, and being able to focus your attention in the right places. It just makes me think of the governance or the assessments that we're looking at now is a good way because it's a top-down and bottom-up approach. So you may think from the top, hey, this role clarity stuff's not really working, but you go talk to the team and the team says, man, we really do know what we're doing here. The trouble is we don't have alignment with what the goals are on the project, so we don't know what to measure. So you're thinking, I'm communicating clearly as a leader. They're just not getting it, right? They don't know what they're supposed to do. And you try to fix them, and they go, wow, we really know what our roles are in the team. We play well together. We just don't have a clear picture of what success is on the project. And you got both sides pointing.
And when I would do these, I'd ask, I go through these areas and ask a series of questions. Y'all can think of the questions you can ask. It's pretty self-explanatory. But I ask at different levels because it needs to be pervasive. Correct. The management always said, "Oh, we got this. We're solid." Fleeing.
Do you have any practical ways to ensure key stakeholder understanding in a, maybe an environment where you can't go and ask directly, or there's too many that you can't, ask everyone in the environment?
I would say one of the critical factors when you're dealing with stakeholders up front, you've identified your stakeholders, you know who they are. One of the things I like to ask is, what is the best way to communicate with you? And that's, I do that both from just a practical perspective, a generational perspective. You might want me to text. You might want me to email. You might want a face-to-face meeting. Wherever practical, do communicate the way that the individual you're communicating with prefers and the way that they're going to get the message the best.
That's a tough one. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Jenny, you said something earlier, though, to document. I had a case a few years ago with a client, and boy, we were best buddies. We were on the same page. We had a few beers together. We knew how this project was supposed to run. And as soon as their budget got really tight, well, things shifted dramatically. And a lot of the things that we had verbally agreed upon just fell by the wayside.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Even if you do have that phone call or the face-to-face meeting, follow up with a note afterwards that says, here's what don't say here's what we agreed to, say here's what I understood from our meeting. If you have any differences of opinion, please let me know.
Amy, you're probably in a unique environment being in the nonprofit world. How do you guys look at measuring performance?
We're honored to be a part of this. We're in a different world, and these two dear ladies and that guy know I'm very technically challenged. I still live in a daytime world. You said something, both of y'all done a great job. I personally feel like the communication aspect, I feel that interpretation in large part is left up to the recipient. That's where it gets confusing. And in our world today, communication probably is part of what I've thought about your example of 20 years or whatever. I guess a lot of times it's delicate in your role that the client you're working with might not want to hear what you suggest, and then you're in a no man's land, no woman's land. But the communication breakdown, I don't want to get off on a tangent any more than I am. I think that's at the core of corporate, nonprofit ministry, government, our leaders. Communication is imperative, because if you assume, that's the kiss of death in our world. It really is.
And I'm old school because I'm old. It's just going to get worse. It has the ingredients to get worse, I think. We're going now to nobody wants to speak face to face, and I think that's a great way to communicate and read you and see cues. We're all going to this texting and emails. I've got people that will email back and forth a couple offices down. So I worry about that, but I agree with the value of it.
Andy, the communication models that are out there that are older are good to look at. So sometimes the solutions to our problems are in the past. We need to look at them. So radio communication was done a very specific way, where there's confirmation sent and received, the message is understood. And it's a very simple process. It seems like overkill. But in the world of email and text, it's very important that you not allow it to be one-way communication. You have to confirm. You have to look at that other party and make sure that their understanding meets the needs of the group.
And one more answer to your question too. This doesn't necessarily guarantee it, but again, I'm going back to measuring performance. I'm not as worried about the communication breakdown, and we can have a bunch of exceptions to this, but if I'm measuring performance and I'm tracking, I'm not as worried about the communication. It's always going to be a risk, but I'm looking for little blips in my performance to say, oh wait, where's the deficiency? And you said, I think somebody said this too, I would argue too, I drink the Kool-Aid, most of the problems you're going to find in a function, I think you can relate back to one of these areas in some shape or form.
There's just an old rule of 10 on communication too. If you're the leader, you need to go around and check on your people and praise their progress 10 times before you earn the right to redirect. And that's a hard one for a leader to do. You have to invest a lot of time. But if you go and you inspect the work of someone through a casual encounter, or you get a report and you drill down, take time to say, I like what you're doing. You're on the right track. Before you jump into those few little nitpicks that just set you off because you know from a past project that that's been a problem, and all of a sudden you go and you let all that pent-up emotion from 3 or 4 previous problems spill out on an individual who knows absolutely nothing about why you're all spun up. It's much better to start your relationship with your project team in looking for those opportunities to praise. Build that trust, build that relationship, and that works with a client. As like you say, you drink a few beers, you get to know each other, and all that's great when there's plenty of money in the bank. But, you know, when you're in Daytona Beach with 4 college buddies, and between all of them you don't have enough cash left to buy gas to get back home, then suddenly people start pointing fingers.
92 spring break. Yeah.
So, same way with project.
You gotta do our next breakfast and bagels on that. I think you should hold it. Not on spring break, on breaks.
Well, hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
That's right.
I see your next, sample project is the spring break.
But again, the bonus is you can apply this model to anything, and it's simple. It's hard to be introspective and inspect your own. I challenge you to go back now to your function and just run through these and think about that. You know, do I have decent policy and procedure, whether they're written or and are they understood? Am I measuring performance? Am I measuring the right thing? If I identify what my true objective is, what my goals are, and am I measuring to those? And do I have any kind of, and I say react, you can call it continuous improvement. And am I having some continuous improvement, lessons learned, and am I managing risks? Any other questions or comments?
In a nonprofit environment, how do you manage volunteers to the same standards?
So Emmett runs Mission of Hope, so that's why that's very
Yeah,
important.
we're only profit. We're for profit. We don't. No, that's a huge problem. I went to a Butterfly Fund run, and I'm thinking all these volunteers, and I've helped put on stuff like that, and it's so hard because at least here I've got something to hold over their head. They're giving me their time. It's hard to. I'm letting them off the hook. It's hard to expect a lot out of them because it's free. I'm not giving my time.
Amen. That's a very open and encompassing statement. When you're not paying someone, there's a little bit, but once again, there's a, you know, we are blessed, as this dear brother beside me can attest, and the Mace and Tammy. We do have a dedicated group of volunteers, and it blows you away at their commitment, but they believe in the mission. They believe in the mission first. It has nothing to do with me or anybody else. They believe in the mission of what we do. That's imperative. So you've got to continually remind people of what the mission is. And you may not like this, and you may not
agree with
it.
The mission.
You really, you can't, as awesome as it is, you can't retire from ABC corporate entity and do things the way you did it for 30, 35 years at the nonprofit organization. It's a noble attempt. I did it and ate a lot of crow doing it years ago. You can't do it from that world. But it should be humbling to whoever leads whatever group to acknowledge, wow, all these people, all these friends,
Yes.
they believe in this for some reason. And you have to acknowledge that.
But when I've been involved in some of these, not yours, it's always been weak here. This is probably pretty strong. Maybe this, but here's a hammer. Go do that. I'm like, I need a little more direction. I need a little more. Stand here, hold this sign. Libby and I ran an extra 5 miles. But we could go. We didn't see the sign because I think they need a little work here to understand and maybe manage the risk.
And that's a good point, because we had a change of, I work with a nonprofit, and we had a change of personnel. And so we had a vacancy in one of our roles, and everybody had to step in and take part of that individual's tasks until that role could be filled again. And we all volunteered, we all had the clarity, role clarity, we had the measures, we understood what the goal was, but we forgot the other side of the chart. people took on roles, but they didn't know the procedures or what they needed to do in
Yep.
that role, or when they needed to do it in that role. And then all of a sudden, we got into risk management. It was like, shoot, it's 2 weeks from the event, and we still have to do X, Y, and Z, and it was like all hands on deck,
Yeah.
and we just called everybody, and they were in there working. But yeah, you have to look at all 4 quadrants.
And I'm taking notes on future presentation topics because I've heard a couple here, motivation being a major one. It does go down to why are these people volunteering? What are they getting out of it? I don't work just for the paycheck. I've done that before. If I don't love the company I'm working for, if I don't believe in the product, it's not going to work. Similarly,
Good for you. Does she work with you?
I like her too. I like her.
Maybe a trip to Maui for them. No, listen, you know why? You know why? Misty, I'll shut up after this. You know why? Listen, y'all don't know me from Adam. Let me tell you why that's important. I heard this years ago and I bought into it. My whole journey in life is I came out of the corporate world to get into ministry. That's a story I won't bore any goodwill. We've already got with it. And let me tell you what's imperative. It doesn't matter who you work for, what you do. If you're miserable at your 9 to 5, others will pay the price for it.
yes.
You'll take it home. You'll take it to other venues. It'll create other stress. So you better love what you do. You better love it. Because if you don't, it's an accumulative kind of thing that is just, it'll bring heartbreak and heartache eventually. So that's great to hear.
Can I get an amen? Can I get
Sure,
an
yeah,
amen?
go ahead.
Well, good. The other bonus is you get out 10 minutes early to enjoy your day. That's what we do here at Management Solutions.
We do have
give value.
left.
We
If
give
you
value.
would, because we're trying to continuously improve and to bring you topics that you'd be interested in, if you would please fill out the evaluation form in front of you. I'd really appreciate it. You can just leave it on the table. We'll put them up afterwards. And there's lots of food and beverages left. Help yourself.
Good job, guys.